Thanks everyone for joining us today for our panel discussion on the ABCs of ESG. I'm Cindy Gage. I'll be your moderator today. I'm a board member with NEWIEE and chair of the marketing committee and vice president of client strategy at C+C, a social good marketing firm located in Boston. Before we get going, we'll have a few announcements and updates. First, a big thank you to our annual event sponsors, Eversource, First Light, Mass Clean Energy Center, and Robinson & Cole. It's your support that helps us bring this great programming forward to the NEWIEE community. Next, just a plug for some upcoming events. We have a terrific panel coming up next week, Planning for Climate Resilience at the local level. That will be on March 24th from 4 to 5:30. And as usual, a terrific panel of speakers for NEWIEE. And then in April, of course, our annual awards gala, which is not to be missed. This is our 10th annual awards gala. Really exciting. Stay tuned for new updates on our keynote speakers. And then just a bit of housekeeping. We do always want to have a nice, engaging conversation. So please feel free to use the Zoom dashboard to ask questions and questions for answered during our panel. We will address questions at the end of our discussion today and have plenty of time to answer all of your questions. Please note that the Q&A window, there's a Q&A window and a chat box. We're going to take the questions from the Q&A window only. You may ask your questions anonymously. Just please state so when you pose your question, and we'll respect that if that's requested. Okay, with that said, let's get started and talk about the ABCs of ESG. Next slide, please, Debbie. So ESG is an acronym for environment, social, and governance. And typically it's a measure that's been used to consider the sustainability and societal impact of companies and their impact on business. But as our panelists will explain to you today, it's really become a much bigger business strategy than that. Next slide, please, Debbie. And ESG is no longer just relevant to your investment community. It's critical to investors, yes, but it's also important to your customers, to your communities, and to your employees. Next slide, please. And communications is a really critical part of ESG. I recently saw a presentation from the Shelton Group that highlighted their study that found that only 30% of customers believe the companies that do not communicate about their good works are as trustworthy as those who do. And 1 in 4 customers say that companies who don't communicate about their good efforts aren't as trustworthy as those who do. So really important to share what you're doing from an ESG perspective to influence customer perception, employee perception, community perception. Suzanne Shelton took a look at a whole range of companies and had them ranked on good list and bad list. And ESG factors were the #3 ranking consideration for getting a company on the good list. Things like how you treat your employees, how you give to your communities, concerns about the environment, etc. So it was #3 as a factor to get you on the good list, but it was #1 to get you on the bad list. If you didn't have good scores and good perceptions in terms of ESG factors like how you treat your employees or the honesty and transparency with which you run your organization or take care of the environment, those factors were really potent in marking a company on the bad list. So again, communications is a really critical part to making your ESG strategy work for you with all your target audiences. Now, I've got a panel today of really phenomenal women who are going to speak to you about different aspects of ESG, starting with Dr. Jamie Bechtel, who's the CEO of Kito Impact. Jamie is a senior strategy, impact, and business executive with extensive global experience in over 35 countries. She's founded and built 2 visionary and enduring companies, including Kito Impact, which is a company focused on helping small and mid-cap companies develop and achieve their ESG goals. She's an experienced board member, including service as chair of the board of a public company, SNES, and vice chair of the not-for-profit Planet Women. Jamie's a highly regarded ESG expert with an eye on the business case and a bias for action. A frequent speaker on leadership and sustainability issues, Jamie has a PhD and a JD and was honored in Fast Company magazine as one of 60 women heroes changing the world. She lives in Seattle with her husband, 2 children, dog, chicken, and ducks. Yes, really, we saw them. Not necessarily listed in order of importance. So welcome, Jamie, thank you. We're also joined today by Stephanie Paxton Jackson, who is co-owner of QuickLock. Stephanie loves a challenge, whether it's owning a women's clothing store for 18 years, starting a new career in health coaching, or running the New York City Marathon. She's ready to grab any opportunity. She gets to learn, commit, and dedicate energy to improving herself and making an impact on the community or the world. In 2015, Stephanie's father suddenly passed away, leaving the family business QuickLock to her and her 2 sisters. All 3 women are excited and honored by the opportunity to be part of their family legacy. And together, they are leading this 3rd-generation family company into the future and committing to create a more equitable world. As owners of a global business, Stephanie and her sisters feel it's important they do their part to be good stewards to their customers, their communities, and the planet. In the last 4 years, the 3 owners have focused on implementing several changes to further that vision. A few accomplishments include major plant remodels for efficiency and productivity, initiating a corporate social responsibility program, developing a fiduciary board, doing audits of their hiring practices down to the supply chain, cross-training amongst departments, and developing a sustainable closure. Stephanie is thrilled with the enthusiasm of QuickLock's leadership. Their longtime employees and their new CEO have shown for this new focus. Their ability to continue the great work of her grandfather and father is an honor. And then finally, Leela Dillon, the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Communications from Ameresco. Leela is Senior SVP of Corporate Marketing and Comms for Ameresco, a leading clean energy technology integrator, focusing on energy efficiency and renewable energy solutions. Leela has more than 20 years of experience in leading corporate marketing and communications, partner strategy, and business development initiatives for industry-leading global technology companies. Recognizing the prominence of ESG initiatives within Ameresco's core mission, values, and vision, Leela worked to launch Ameresco's ESG committee in 2020. This group spearheaded the company's first ESG report, Doing Well by Doing Good. Serving as a committee member in ESG, volunteerism, as well as on the Safety Ambassadors Program, Leela is responsible for identifying, communicating, and reporting on the many ways ESG is embedded in Ameresco's culture. Additionally, Leela participates in strategic industry initiatives, including her position on the program committee for the Internet of Things Solutions World Congress. She's chaired global buildings and infrastructure programs and led international plenary sessions on women leadership in IoT, smart city, SaaS, PaaS, and multi-purpose smart infrastructure platforms. Prior to joining Ameresco, Leela served as VP of Marketing and North American Distribution for Big Belly, a leading provider of smart city, IoT, and smart waste management solutions. With the core focus in clean tech, energy solutions, renewable, distributed energy generation, IoT, smart city, cloud, mobile, and telecommunications, Leela is a recognized leader for women in technology. Welcome, panelists, and thank you so much for joining us today. With that introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Jamie Bechtel to get started talking about ESG.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining this morning. I'm just going to share my screen. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the fellow panelists. What a joy it is to start year 2 of quarantine with such amazing women, and truly inspired by the work that you ladies have done and the leadership you've provided. And Cindy, certainly thank you for bringing us together. I just wanted to give a little bit of background on ESG and CSR. And I mean, frankly, there are a lot of acronyms out there, and there's a lot of debate over those acronyms. And there's, a very detailed history of the value of each of the acronyms, but ultimately, CSR and ESG are about what our footprints are and how others perceive those footprints. Arguably, CSR emerged early, and if we're optimistic, emerged as an intent of a handful of people in various companies to do well and provide leadership. And as we've evolved, things have gotten more rigorous and more measurable. And ESG has kind of become the term for that measurement component. Prior to ESG, there was SRI, which was socially responsible investing. And SRI was kind of a negative screen to eliminate companies for investors. ESG has emerged as a positive screen to identify companies for investors. But the overall umbrella is CSR, and ultimately we're all trying to make the world a little bit a better place. I think the important thing to understand is with all of these acronyms and all of these approaches, it is about building a better business case. Especially as we go on, and I'll give you some reasoning, but this is not about just doing good for doing good sake. This is ultimately about building a triple bottom line for a company. So there's several things that have changed in the last few years. I've actually been involved more on the environmental side historically, and then in the last decade on the social and governance side. And over the last, I would say, 20 years, there are 3 major paradigm shifts, or 3 major things driving paradigm shifts. The first is younger generations and their consumer practices. For a while, I was an advisor with the Clintons in the Clinton Global Initiative, and it was fascinating talking to the leaders of Unilever and Coca-Cola, where 10 years ago they would say customer behavior is really not going to drive this, steer this ship. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, they started coming to meetings saying, holy crow, the new generations spend money very, very differently. So just to give you a taste, 1/3 of consumers are now buying from brands based on their social environmental impact. That was of 2 years ago. I'm sure that number's gone up. And of the hundreds of brands at Unilever, for example, nearly half the company's global growth is in their sustainable lines. As I mentioned, this is just a quote from the chairman of Nestle saying that millennials are really consciously spending. So for example, a millennial will spend 30% more on a cup of coffee if they know it has a sustainable or resilient impact for the communities that grow the coffee. Technology has changed, and this is a big one. So if you're claiming to do good and you're not doing good, you're going to get busted. And that's really driving more rigor through the system, and that's absolutely a good thing. And finally, regulation is getting better. And I don't know if you felt this is a Gibson guitar, just to give you an example, but about 15 years ago, during the Bush administration, a very little known law was passed called the Lacey Act, which makes all companies in the United States, for example, responsible for the sourcing of their raw materials. So Gibson Guitar sourced rosewood from Madagascar illegally. And as a result of that, the CEO was sentenced to prison. I think he ultimately evaded prison, but he was held criminally liable. So regulation is getting smarter. Advocates are getting smarter about regulation, and that's really driving a lot of the change that we're seeing. So rather than talk about what ESG is, I wanted to kind of just talk about what ESG is not. And so I'll quickly go through 3 myths. The first is, this was my mouse pad for about 15 years when I worked at a major environmental organization. It's all a bunch of tree hugging hippie crap. It's not. It's not anymore, that's for sure. And I had the privilege very early on of working with Rob Walton, then chairman of Walmart, when he decided to roll out CSR at Walmart. And just the business rigor that was brought to the table of, if we're going to make this change, what is the impact on my consumer? It was revealing how important and how collaborative relationships could drive better outcomes. So working with businesses to find not only the offsets that you can do, but actually how core business, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but what are you delivering as a core business offering and how can that make the world a better place? As Cindy touched upon, there are a variety of business outcomes that should be accrued to your company, and if they're not, your strategy is not right. They're financial outcomes, outcomes for the customers, driving more customers, operational outcomes, and organizational outcomes. And so one of the biggest shortcomings of the early CSR is that CSR was kind of siloed in the CSR department and really did not get much traction. Part of the art of integrated CSR, which is the acronym I've settled on, is giving marketing folks what they need, giving HR folks the words that they need, really being multilingual across the company. Finance, for example, if you talk to your CFO about future-proofing the company for risk, if you talk about investor relations, cost savings, they start to perk up. Now is a really interesting time with everybody grounded. We're getting a lot of traction on how to keep people flying less. And the CFOs, when they run the numbers and see how much money they're saving, it saves a lot of talking on my end. Myth number 2 is this is just all a big pile on and it's going to go away. I would say that in the early or mid to late 90s, we weren't sure which way it was going to go. I think if you ask anyone in the field, not only are we shocked with the staying power, again, largely due to new consumer practices, but also with the traction that climate change is getting. And for those of us who came up in the environmental field, that's a huge relief. So just this is just a very quick, I update this pretty regularly. These are numbers from 2020. The pandemic has brought even a stronger sense of responsibility. So nearly 3/4 of consumers are sympathetic toward others and have an intent, are intent on making a positive impact on their communities through their purchases. Over 93% of public companies now publish CSR reports. I don't know if you've heard, but Goldman Sachs will no longer take companies public without board diversity. That was an announcement a couple months ago. And in 2020, Mars committed, for example, $1 billion to climate change and $5.5 billion to healthy meals by 2025. Now, of course, these are good things to do, but if you think about it, Mars, if they don't shore up the communities where they work, they don't have product. And so it is, to some extent, self-serving, as business should be. I won't go into this in detail. This is from Catalyst, but just talking about the impact of millennials. So millennials now move about $1 trillion through global consumer spending. There are over 80 million millennials in the US alone. It's just a huge group, and they're making more and more money, driving more and more change, which is fantastic. Myth number 3, very quickly, is that this is going to cost a fortune. And there are definitely ESG sharks out there, consultants, and in many cases, they have set the price tag to entry quite high, but there is the ability to just get started and do the best that you can do. So for example, our firm, it really, we feel our mandate almost is this should be slow and steady. This should not be something where ESG experts parachute in, charge hundreds of thousands of dollars and then leave. It should just be an ongoing process. And as long as you're heading in the right direction, there will be setbacks, there will be jumps forward, but just getting on the journey is a big important part. Breaking down silos is a huge piece of this. Historically, we have seen that, and you can see it in the headlines and you can see it in the trends, this pivot between the E, the S, and the G, and really beginning to look through those silos and see how things are connected will save time and money and help ensure that you have a great foundation for ESG. And then, one of the things we really talk about is follow the trend lines, not the headlines. Really do what's right for you and your company. So this should be individualized to a large extent. Communications is a huge part, not only externally. I mean, really the way ESG is still picked up is through individuals combing the news, making marks. It's starting to get automated. There was just a big announcement this morning with automation, but external communications are important. So are internal communications and innovative partnerships. I swear that I will never be in a meeting where I know all of the people in the meeting. If we're going to innovate and we're going to grow interesting, thoughtful partnerships, we need to not know each other when we get in the room. So again, how do you begin? You just, from my perspective, you commit to beginning, and then the rest sort of comes naturally. But it's important to commit to begin, assess, where you're at. A lot of groups don't, or a lot of companies don't understand how much good they're already doing. And I know Stephanie will talk a bit about that. Set some goals, run some programs, even if they're small to start. Measure the programs, and then communicate and start again. Make sure it's a reiterative process. So that's all I have just as an introduction. I'm going to just stop sharing my screen and turn you over to Stephanie, who I'm going to cry, Stephanie. I've known Stephanie for almost a decade now. And not only is she one of my favorite people, but she's one of my favorite business leaders. So it's a delight to be on this panel with her.
Oh, thank you, Jamie. Yes, you are near and dear to my heart. I just want to say hi, my name is Stephanie Jackson, and I want to thank you, Cindy and Debbie and Maureen and everybody at NEWIEE. I feel honored to be here and speaking on this amazing and such an important issues. Again, I am one of 3 owners of QuickLock Corporation, myself and my 2 sisters. And I will tell you a little bit about QuickLock and how I got here, because it was not in the plan. 67 years ago, my grandfather, Floyd Paxton, started QuickLock Corporation. And he did this by inventing something that I think all of you have probably used in your lives. And it is called the QuickLock. And some people think it's, the bread clip as another tagline. And at that time, it was predominantly used to close bags of Washington State apples. And then in 1968, our father, Jerry Paxton, took the QuickLock globally and became a market leader with selling billions of closures we do a year to bakeries and produce and other markets. We have 6 plants around the world. We employ over 300 people, and we sell into over 100 countries. Well, in 2015, our father suddenly passed. And as I lightly mentioned, there was no succession plan. My father had been president for 51 years at QuickLock and was the sole decision maker. And with his 3 daughters, it just was known back then that, ladies, let the men take care of the business. And we were not really introduced into our family business. And now suddenly we found ourselves at the helm in 2015 of the possibility of taking over our family business. And we knew this was a tremendous, unique situation. We were honored to carry on our family legacy, so we were all in. However, we did know that we were going to be female owners of a company that we had never worked at, and that was male, predominantly male dominated. I can imagine a few of you women can attest to maybe being in that place. And so But one of the things that really resonated with my sisters and I, that we knew and we believe that when women get into the places where decisions are being made, we make meaningful change. And I know that I'm talking to people all over the world or in different parts of the United States right now that are in those positions, that have that opportunity to help in these amazing, important decisions. My sisters and I knew that we were a plastics company with a global footprint, and it was very important for us to minimize that impact. And we wanted to, like my bio said, is we wanted to be good stewards, to this world, to the communities that our businesses were in, and to our employees. So I tell you this, well, it's so neat is when preparing for being in front of this panel, it makes you look back, it makes me take the time of go, wow, less than 6 years ago, to look at our company who had really not ever talked about CSR or ESG work, and to look at where we are now. I am incredibly proud of all the accomplishments we have made. That we actually are becoming influencers in our industry, and our hope is around the world. What's really neat is this morning, I was sent it's so interesting. There's no coincidences. I was sent an email this morning from somebody in our company that said a customer of ours switched over to our Eco Lock, which is our new sustainable closure, which is actually what I'm holding here, because of looking at our CSR report and seeing what our vision and our mission and our values were. And that was really important to them. And they now are paying a higher price for a sustainable closure, but they are incredibly confident in that and really impressed of the work we're doing. So right there, it proves that the work we're doing is really important. As Jamie had mentioned, to consumers out there, obviously to in public companies, to investors. It really is becoming something that is way more than a fad. So what I want to just leave with you guys today is a couple lessons that we have learned in doing this work. And so one of them is, and I think it's one of our greatest assets, my sisters and I, is admitting that we do not know it all. We call in the experts. We did not need to know all the answers, and we did not need to do it alone. And we asked a lot of questions. This is really, this is brave work. It takes brave people to push against some old business standards and ask for more. And so what's really neat is we've also brought in some brave people, and you heard from one of them right before me, Jamie Bechtel. We have partnered with her and her company, Kito Impact. And she's really helped us form a framework on how to do good while doing well. And we really have shown our company that they are not mutually exclusive. And what's interesting is when we first started this work, our leadership thought the CSR was just a report, just something that you wrote and kind of collaborated on for a report once a year. And as we continued to move through, as Jamie said, slow and steady, leadership and the rest of our company really found out that this is something that integrates into all your areas of your business, from how you which was mentioned, how you treat your employees, where you source your materials, how you deal with energy and waste, how we give back. So we have found out that, again, you do not have to do it alone. We also have really had a great time with working with sustainable partners. And there are a lot of companies out there doing really good work, and we've collaborated with them. We've explored opportunities, tested solutions. And over the past years, we've really had a great experience of working with other people and linking arms. Secondly, like Jamie mentioned, what we found out when we started auditing our company is that we were already doing some really great stuff. So you may already in your companies be doing some great stuff and you're just not communicating that. And so we are building off of that. We found out that many of our plants were already recapturing waste. We found out that in our Ireland plant, they volunteer in their community and are 1,400 hours a year. And that wasn't being communicated. And so that was really exciting. And we're building off of that. We also, when auditing, we found out we were one of the best in keeping our employees safe. We had 0 hours lost in work injuries. And that was really important to us. And now we built up off that. We already were doing some philanthropic work as a company, but Jamie's really helped us to start to be a lot more intentional and more strategic. And now we're growing all this great foundation. We're just about to, this is really exciting. We're just about to certify our whole supply chain is free from human trafficking. Oh, I mean, that's just amazing. We're also auditing our suppliers to make sure that we are sourcing materials that are from companies that share our CSR values. And we are making bold goals to reduce our carbon and our waste in the next 5 years. And then, as I just said, we are continually innovating on more sustainable products like our Eco Lock, which I just showed you, and a variety of other new exciting products are being discovered. And lastly, what I would say is it is never too late. You know, I know that when we started, less than 5 years ago, we felt that, oh gosh, are we way behind, in this work? Is it, can we even start now? And we have found out that you can start at any time, just like Jamie says, just commit. And what's been interesting is we all know that businesses have strategic plans, and a lot of them focus on operational excellence. And so they already have some, like we did, some really grounded values. And so we started there to begin started our focus on our ESG work. One of our values is of well-being, taking care of planet, people. One of our values is innovation, always having a place where people can thrive and fail and collaborate. And we also found out you do not have to be a big company to have, and with a huge CSR department. Jamie helped us realize that 99% of the companies out there actually employ 500 people or less. So we actually, our small family business is one of the majority. And we actually, what's really neat is we can, if we're all committed, we can make a difference. And sometimes it can feel very insurmountable, but just begin, as Jamie said, slow and steady, and don't step back from your values. I remember a bunch of New York consultants had told us, oh, you will never, customers will not pay, a higher price for sustainable products. And just as I said, the email this morning proved that is that is definitely a myth. And I'll close lastly. This is another great data for the work that we're doing is our latest 2 big hires at QuickLock said when they were coming on board, the main reason that they were excited and they chose QuickLock to work for is looking at our CSR report, seeing that we were a company that had depth, that we were walking our talk, and that was incredibly important for where they were going to spend their time. And so again, more data on that this work is really important, it matters, it's valuable, and you just need to be brave. Thank you guys so much for having me. And I'd like to have you now be introduced to an amazing woman, Leela Dillon. She'll continue this conversation.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. It's hard to follow you, I'm not gonna lie, between you and Jamie, just terrific. So first, let me just start out by saying thank you to Cindy for putting together this really important panel. I wish you had done this 2 years ago. I would have tremendously valued from it for sure, but here we are today and I get to be part of it. So that's terrific. Also wanted to say thank you to Debbie and Maureen for helping us pull together, and really all of NEWIEE for putting this together. So my name is Leela Dillon. I head up the corporate marketing and communications at Ameresco. Because I'm a marketing person, I'm a slide person. So bear with me for a minute. I'm gonna put up a few slides. I promise not too many for us to share here so that I can make sure that I stay on track. Okay, so let me just give a little bit of background. Super fun to hear about Quick Lock and also the great work that Kito Impact is doing. So I thought I'd just share a minute about Ameresco. We are a clean tech integrator and renewable energy asset developer, owner, and operator. So what does that mean? It's essentially, I sort of think of it as 3 components. First, it's our customers, always the projects that we do. And we really do projects that are based on the demand side of the energy portfolio as well as the supply side. So from a demand side, we work with our customers to reduce their load and to make them as efficient as possible with all of the advanced technologies that are available in the market today. From the supply side, we really look at the generation and what is needed. Is it a solar array? Is it a power plant? Is it battery, microgrid, you name it. But we really look at sort of what's needed in order to supply that company or that school or university or that government facility with the energy that's needed. And so we really look at all parts of the portfolio. We work with the government as a tremendous part of our business, also the C&I industry, colleges, universities, we're in public housing, healthcare, airports, K-12, you name it. So we really cross a number of industries and have the benefit of working in all of those. The second part of our business is our own portfolio of assets. So we really build power plants, we have solar farms, you name it. We have renewable natural gas plants, some of the largest in the US. So that's a really good and important part of our business that is entirely environmentally focused, as you can imagine. And then the third part of our business is our operations and maintenance group. And this is a very important part of the work that we do, whether it's plants that we have built or whether it's plants that already exist. We go in and we operate and maintain them, make sure that they're as efficient as possible and that they're running properly. And that is a very important part of what we do. In terms of our makeup, we're over 1,000 employees. We're across the United States and the UK and Canada. We have over 70 different offices, and I mentioned that because I'll talk a little bit about that as we went through our ESG journey. That was a very important part of this. But essentially in a snapshot, if you think about Ameresco, we are an environmental company. And so when you think about ESG, this is what we do. Our founder has been a pioneer in the industry, in the energy industry for his entire life. He has spent his career devoted to environmental impact. And our co-founders too have spent their entire careers focused on this. So this has been something that's just in our DNA. And it is something that is just a part of our everyday. Now, that said, as we move in, Cindy asked me to prepare just a couple of slides regarding our journey in ESG and how we have come to where we are today. And hopefully this will be helpful to some of you. Where did we begin with ESG? Well, as I said, it's part of who we are. It's just what we've done since the beginning. We're a 20-year-old company. We went public 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago. And in the environment has been just something that we focused on from day one. And how can we make our customers have a better environmental impact? How can we do it through our own projects? All of that is part of who we are. However, if I'm fully transparent, I would say that as we did earnings calls and spoke to not only our existing investors, but new investors that were looking at the company, we got asked a lot about our ESG practices and what we were doing and how we were doing it and how we were reporting on it and things like that. And for us, that really spurred a big journey when it came to ESG, because where we have done a tremendous job on the environmental side for the history of our business, there's two other components to this, and it really is a much bigger thing than just that. And so we really decided to dive in and think about it, not just from investors asking questions and spending more and more time talking about it, but also, really talking to our employees, our customers. As Cindy's covered in some of her slides, it really is. It's so many different groups that care so much about this. And for us, the journey of working with our employees and our customers through this process is probably what I have found to be most rewarding. So again, Cindy called out this in her slide. I think it's really important to restate it. Communication is key. There was a lot that Ameresco was doing, but, hard for me to say this, being the corporate marketing person, I don't think we were doing a very good job communicating all of these things that we were doing. And, when I was quickly answering questions, I realized, well, it shouldn't just be answering questions. We really need to make that more prominent. And we need to provide great ways for people to learn about this on their own versus having to speak to someone at the company. So communication is so important. As I talked about before, we were doing well by doing good since the day that we started, but we just didn't have the right infrastructure in place to really talk about that. And so what did we do? If you get down to brass tacks, we started by establishing an ESG committee. And most important in this, I can't stress this enough, is we really wanted diverse representation in this committee. This was not a corporate marketing committee, right? That would never be a proper way to go about this. We needed representation across our whole company. As I said, we have over 1,000 employees. We have offices across the US, Canada, and the UK. And we wanted to make sure that everyone brought their voice and also their expertise, because a finance person looks at things very differently than a marketing person, than a legal person, you name it, across all the different groups. And so our CFO heads up our committee. We have HR wildly involved and sitting on our committee. We have the head of our UK group in London on this committee, head of our finance group in Canada on this committee. We have the head of our corporate council sitting on this committee. So we have a great group of diverse individuals that came together and got in a room or got on a Zoom or got on a Teams call, especially over the last year, to really come together and come up with a proper representation on what this ESG journey was going to look like. So first, as I said, we really wanted to ensure diversity across the company. Next was really defining our strategy, because we can't do everything. And I think we quickly realized that with all of the ideas that the committee came up with, we also have full-time jobs. So we needed to get very focused quickly on what was our strategy and how we were going to articulate that. And then the last part of it, for us being a public company, is our accountability. We couldn't come up with ideas that sounded good, but we're not measurable. So the measurability of what you're doing is really, really important. And that's something that we focused on as we went through this journey. So Jamie, I think you had this really lovely slide, probably a lot better than this one, because I like the way you broke out the sections, tried to simplify it into sort of three key things in terms of our blueprint. We decided after we formed the committee that of course what we wanted to do is come up with the strategy, come up with the accountability, and come up with an ESG report, because one of our largest issues also was communicating what we did. And so when we think about a blueprint, if you're thinking of your first ESG report, we kind of bucket it into 3 different areas: discovery, drafting and design, and then the communication part of it. While this slide sort of helps bucket it, I don't think it does it in the right way, because discovery is huge. It should take up the whole slide. I mean, that's really where we spent the most of our time. Once we had our committee, we quickly realized that with the different level of expertise for E, S, and G, that we needed to establish subcommittees in each of those categories. Again, to keep us focused on what we thought that we could do and to keep us real. All of us couldn't do all parts of it. So we came up with these subcommittees that were really squarely focused on the things that we thought that we could do that would make a meaningful difference. The next thing that we did, and I don't know if this is true for everybody, but for public companies, there's Sustainalytics, there's MSCI, there are these great ESG rating reports that come out. And for us, I would say they were extremely helpful, because it gave us our baseline and it helped us identify very quickly where we were doing well and where we were having weakness. And the weakness weren't necessarily because we weren't doing a lot of those things. Largely, it was around we weren't communicating a lot of those things. But there were certainly some areas where I think we also, if we're fully transparent with one another, said we need to work on that. And we need to do a better job, and we need to get the right people in the room to work on that wholeheartedly with the right level of expertise. And so then that internal audit came into play. Now we sort of knew where our baseline was. We knew we had some ideas of what we wanted to do, but we really had to come outside of corporate office here and chat with the different business units that we have, the different key stakeholders, and learn what was happening around the company. Sitting in the corporate office is helpful because, you know, a lot of strategy is developed and all that sort of thing, but it's also somewhat hurtful because there's tremendous work that's getting done in all of these different offices with these fantastic teams that I never even knew about. So for me, that was probably one of the most exciting and fun parts of this journey, is hearing about what our people were doing, not because it was part of their job, but was because of who they are and what they wanted to be doing. So we spent a lot of time doing that internal audit, talking to people across the company and really learning what was happening. And then we started really coming up with what we thought our area of focus was. What are the things we're going to do in those categories? And then how are we going to measure it? Because anyone that's done their own personal goals, it's really fun to put these, you know, big casting statements out there. But if they're not numbers associated with it and real timelines and deadlines, it's very arbitrary whether you met that goal or not. We did not want that. We wanted to be crystal clear on setting measurable goals that were hard. You know, they made us uncomfortable, to be honest with you. I think, Stephanie, you covered this, and it's so true. As we came up with some of these, we sort of held on tight and said, can we, you know, is this something we're truly going to be able to achieve in a year, in 3 years, in 5 years? Well, you know what? They should make us uncomfortable. And that is so important. If you're not uncomfortable, you're probably not doing enough. So I want to stress that. Next, drafting and design. So we're fortunate inside here, the walls of Ameresco, we have great writers. We also had within the committee, people who were really willing to jump in and start capturing a lot of the things that we learned through the audit. So that was terrific. And if you don't have that capability, definitely get in an expert because it's so important. We knew though that we needed help in designing our ESG report. We also needed an objective lens on what we've developed. You know, it sounded great for us, but I'm a big fan of drinking my own Kool-Aid, and I really wanted an objective firm to tell me whether I mixed it right or not. And so we were very lucky to have Cindy and C+C jump in and help us. They did a fantastic design. They questioned us when we should be questioned. And we got a tremendous amount of help from them on pulling this together. And it was collaborative. right? We had different people, which is what we wanted. It wasn't one person drafting, and it was everyone participating. And with that comes a whole lot of mixed language and things like that. We really needed a lot of work in bringing it together. And between our internal resources, we have some great ones, and also working with C+C, that was just terrific to get that pulled together. But then the last part is communication. And this is so important. I can't stress this enough. This ESG report for us, I can't even say it was the only, it was just the beginning, because the beginning started 20 years ago when the company was founded, right? And probably even before that, when our founders started their careers protecting and working for the environment. But it really became clear to us that this report was our first stake in the ground, right? And so we were going to do everything we could to communicate this widely and broadly, and to keep ourselves accountable every day, every month, every year to the goals that we're setting forth. And so, of course, I have to think about it from the marketing side. That's website, that's, overview decks, that's our IR site, and a lot of our IR materials that we plan. A lot of internal communications. We have a terrific corporate intranet that we wanted to make this available on. And we also wanted our entire executive management team to be very clued into this process, and also to be very accountable for what we came up with. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go. Okay, so maybe that's here really. Lessons learned. I always love talking about this, because it's a reminder that none of us are perfect, and none of our process is perfect. And coming into this has been a fantastic learning experience, even where I think we're still very much at the early stages of this. But big for us is, again, that internal stakeholder communication. What started as answering a lot of investor questions really became much more of an internal process than anything else, and really communicating broadly across our organization. So in our executive management team meetings, we have those monthly. This was always a topic. At the board of directors meeting, this is the topic, right? We all are participating here. It's very, very important that everyone is a stakeholder in this. So that was key. Next was really coming together and thinking about how can we get our employees more involved. So we have, in all of these different offices, we have so many employees that want to be involved, that are doing their own things, but are not necessarily aware that we can do things together. And what we thought about was that as we polled our employees and spoke to so many different people, there were so many people doing wonderful things out there. But what if we brought everyone together under a couple of very common causes that we could fight together and make a larger impact? And so working with HR and listening to what people were doing, we came up with a couple of really important causes that we wanted to support, and ways that we could support them through volunteerism, through philanthropic efforts, through whatever it means, time, dollars, you name it. But we really want to make a larger impact together. And then the other lesson learned I want to say is it's really important as you go through this process to be agile and be nimble. Because things happen. And if 2020 didn't tell us that, there are things that we could not predict that happened in 2020. And just one small example of them are the wildfires that happened in the West Coast. And it was important that our employees that have customers there, they needed to do something for those people immediately. And they did. And that's absolutely wonderful. So we might have common causes. We might have defined our strategy, but also we might have to pivot. If our customers are in need, if our communities are in need, we might have to change our direction and support them. And that's something that I think is really important for us. I talked before a little bit about getting uncomfortable. That's the most important lesson learned I think I had, is being willing to address the areas where you're weak. Not all companies are perfect in every category. We're not all A+. So it's just being willing to address where you have those weaknesses and what that looks like. And so I think it's really, really important for all of us to be aware of those, to be willing to get uncomfortable, and to be willing to dive in, roll up our sleeves, and work to be better. That's really what this is all about. And then finally, for those of you that are embarking upon this journey and have decided to do an ESG report or CSR or whatever it might be, you can do it. You can pull it together. If you kind of go through the work. An aggressive timeline is very doable. But I would say this is not a short-term thing. This is not a one and done. This is a long-term strategy. And I would say probably even more, it's a journey. And it's a journey that's gonna make you better and get you much further than if you don't do it. So it's something that's just been a tremendous experience for us here. And we're really just at the beginning of it. So then wrapping it up, I promised last slide, and then I'll be done. What's next for us, just in case you're sort of thinking about that, what comes next? Well, I'd say that year 2 is so much different already. I mean, we have the framework in place. We've done the groundwork. We know what our goals are for this year. We also know what we're uncomfortable about and what we really need to focus on for a longer term strategy. So we're doing the basics in terms of, the framework, the monthly committee meetings, coming together, talking, collaborating, checking on how we're doing against our goals. But a much bigger thing for us is how can we get our employees more engaged? And can we communicate that broadly? Can we come up with new ideas? Can we listen to what they are interested in doing? Because this isn't an ESG committee body of work. This is a company-wide body of work to do. And every person can participate in some way. And so that's really our long-term focus here. And then also, I think we're spending a lot of time, this has been so transformative to us that now we get the opportunity to spend a lot of time thinking about what's next, right? What are the big, hard things that we want to tackle, not necessarily for this year or next year, but in our 5-year plan or what have you. And now I feel that we have the right teamwork in place and some of that framework that we really need. We get to roll up our sleeves and have some of those conversations and really think very deeply about where we want to be 5 years from now or what have you. And then finally, just to wrap this up, we're very lucky to have customers that care about this. This has been a driving factor for so many of the projects we've been fortunate enough to do. And so we're constantly working, how can we help our customers that are pursuing their net zero goals? A lot of them have extremely tight timelines. So for us, when I say our feet are in the fire right there working with our customers, you bet we're there. And we're finding new ways through advanced technologies and through the energy solutions portfolio that we have to help our customers get there just as quickly as they can. So that is it. I promise I'm done sharing here. Thanks so much. And I think now I'm turning it back over to Cindy. So thank you, Cindy.
Yes, thank you so much. It's great having all of you here. Truly, 3 of the smartest and most inspiring women I have the opportunity to work with. So thank you for everything that you shared. We have some questions and answers, or questions for answer that I'm going to tee up for all of you now. My first question is for you, Stephanie, and the question is, how is your sustainable quick lock different from your original?
Oh, great. Yes, so our sustainable quick lock is called Eco Lock, and it is made with 20% less petroleum material, petroleum-based material. We have replaced that with a corn and potato starch resin. And that actually might not sound like incredibly impressive. However, to put it into realistic terms, we have a customer here on the West Coast called Fran's Bakery. And they purchase about 100 million closures a year. And they have now gone to our Eco Lock. And in the 6 months of them changing over to the sustainable lock, that is 20% less petroleum-based materials, That is the carbon savings of driving from Canada to Mexico 6 times. So that is a 6-month use of our eco-lock. And so that right there was like, wow, this really does make an impact, you know, in using these kind of materials. And right now, eco-lock is our, you know, we call it eco-lock 1.0. You know, we are continually innovating and working with people to actually keep getting better and better.
Thank you for that. Our next question, this is a fun one. Some of my mostly older male and Caucasian colleagues roll their eyes over D&I, CSR, and ESG as a fad, trend, or greenwashing. How do you counter these attitudes? Jamie, I'd love to start with you on this one.
Oh, Cindy, that's mean. That's a soft pitch. You know, I'm not going to be well behaved on this answer.
There's no need.
I think the easiest way to counteract or counter old white Caucasian men is with old white Caucasian men. And so if you look at some of the moves that business leaders are making and provide that data, it's a pretty compelling business case at this point. So for example, one of the most sort of coveted releases every year is Larry Fink, who is the head of BlackRock. He has oversees $6 trillion with a T dollars in investment. And over the last 3 or 4 years, 3 years ago, he kind of put a stake in the ground and said, this is important. It's gone from this is important to we won't invest in companies that don't have ESG, don't talk about their climate risk, and don't talk about their social risk now as of this year. So taking a look at Larry Fink's statements to his investors and to his CEOs that he invests with is really compelling. And I think the second big point is along the same lines of speaking the language of the individual who's in the way. So for example, if I'm talking to a CFO and I want to reduce carbon emissions, I talk about the cost savings for airfare. A lot of times you can recoup the investment in a short period of time. So with our clients, we look at what can we recoup in a year, what can we recoup in 3 years for short and longer term investments. And those short-term wins, you know, if you kind of start out small, but if you present them in a way, same with marketing, Leila, as you had mentioned, HR, if you pull out the data of retaining an individual, I can't remember, it's like $60,000 to lose an individual and then go find another one. That's how much it costs a company. So it's kind of speaking the language of the individual. But the second piece is like, rest assured, it's coming like a freight train. So we just did an analysis of Biden's likely policies. And even in the next few years, we anticipate more reporting requirements that not only are for the publicly traded companies, but also for their supply chains. So customers are starting to ask, supply chains are starting to get, you know, infiltrated. So I do think increasingly these gentle people who are not addressing it are heading in the direction of BlackBerry. So.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Just for everyone's reference, I did just copy the link for Larry Fink's 2021 letter, and it is fairly compelling as proof points that you can use within your organization for the importance of ESG. And within it, Jamie, if you don't mind me just doing this little segue, this year, in this year's letter, Larry talked about the improved financial performance of organizations that are managing and reporting on ESG, that they are delivering better shareholder returns, that they are driving more innovation within their organizations. Is anything you want to add based on those factors?
Well, yeah, I mean, the business case is irrefutable. And I did also want to respond to Mark's comments on the side that, I mean, bearing in mind that, you know, men still maintain leadership of the vast majority of companies. There are plenty of allies out there. It's a matter of finding them and recruiting them or joining forces with them. but yeah, the business case across the board. You mean with specifically the BlackRock or?
Mhm.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not sure what you wanted me to add to.
Well, I think that I feel like that the Larry Fink letter speaks to improved financial performance and more innovation on the part of companies who are actively measuring their ESG. So that
Yeah.
was what I just wondered if you could comment on how ESG drives innovation.
Yeah. So okay, thank you. So ESG. A lot of times there's a collaborative process, and at QuickLock, innovation has become one of the core pillars. So in finding solutions, how do you find solutions? You talk to your customers, you talk to clients, you talk to employees, you start thinking about solving in a different way. And so innovation itself is a pillar of CSR. But in addition to the innovation piece, the risk mitigation piece on the flip side is also a big part for Larry Fink. So it's really, that's when we talk about future-proofing a company, coming back to the original comment, this is coming. And you can either plan slow and steady, or 5 years from now, spend $1 gazillion because you're hurrying to play catch up. So if you stop and you think about it, asking when Mars invests $1 billion, when Kraft commits to, or Microsoft commits to erasing all of the carbon they've ever done, I am a glass half full person, and I think there are a lot of people in the world that want to do good. But there's freaking money there. There's a reason they're doing this. This is not all a bunch of people who just went out and decided to become hippies. And so I think Larry Fink has ID'd, we see shorelines disappearing. The way insurance is driven is going to be completely different. And so to get out of that, to future-proof, you have to innovate. So to your point, Cindy, innovation is linked to risk management. And this is one of I say CSR, ESG is 70% workbooks, 30% innovation. 70% you can look this stuff up online. Don't hire me, don't hire anybody, just look it up, Google it, go do it. The 30% innovation, that's where you're going to shine. That's where you're going to carve out your niche. That's where you're going to get your earned media. That's where you're going to grow your business, is how you creatively, innovatively tie all of these things together.
Great, thank you. Leila, the next question is for you. What was the time frame for you to initiate the blueprint for your ESG plan and report and complete it?
Good one. Cindy, you know the answer here. I think I quickly picked up the phone and called you and got a lot of good guidance from your team. So we decided this early last year that we needed to do a better job communicating. I'd say it was about halfway through the year that we decided the best job that we could do was to produce a report, because being a public company, we want to make sure that we publicly talk about what we're doing. And so we also then decided, well, why not now? So it was, I'd say we pulled it together in a little bit less than 6 months. But again, this was only the beginning. That process that I took you through, the discovery process, was the largest part of that time frame. And again, dealing with COVID and a lot of the issues, getting everyone together on a call to be able to talk through these things and to do a proper audit across our organization, and then come up with goals that we thought were challenging and measurable. So that was the largest part of that 6-month window. Once you get through that probably took us 4.5 of the 6 months, maybe a little bit longer. Then it was time to start drafting and get going. And that was a rapid fire. Let's pull this together. Let's make sure we're communicating it properly, and getting the different teams involved in that process. So that happened pretty quickly. And then by the time we got all the copy over to you all, Cindy, what did I think? I think we said, oh, it's Friday, great. Can we have a version on Monday? Right, it gives you the whole weekend. So not exactly, but somewhat close to that. So that's why I said before, pulling this together in short order is very possible. I think it was especially possible because of the fact that so much of this is in the DNA of the company. So a lot existed already. What has to be part of the conversation, though, is that this is 100% a journey. And I love that we published a report last year, but I'm really focused on what are we going to do this year, next year, and the 5 years after that. So it can be done quickly as long as you have the right support, the right stakeholders across your organization, and hopefully a lot of things in play that you will learn about as you go through your process.
Stephanie, is there anything you wanted to add to that for context on the Quick Lock side?
You know, I just know as a privately held company, you know, we're not under as much, you know, scrutiny to, you know, report. But for my sisters and I, we wanted to act as a public company. It was incredibly important because it gave us accountability and transparency. Has been talked that we're going to act as if, you know, that we are going to report and communicate this information. And again, like we said, we've proven by tremendous 2 great hires that we've had that made a difference. To, I know from this morning, getting a client to change over to our Eco Lock, and that, you know, we have other small little stories, and that will continue to have a ripple effect on that, you know, as we continue to communicate this information, that is important to the outside world as much as it is important to us. You know, it gets that employee loyalty and buy-in, you know, that we've seen, and we want to continue to. One of our big pillars is engaged employees. Leila talked about that, and that's important to us. That, you know, that they're working for somebody and a company that cares about its communities that we're doing our work in. Another big part of ours, which we talked about at another conference, was how important philanthropic giving becomes part of our ESG and our corporate social responsibility and sustainable work. You know, they aren't, again, in these silos. We're very strategic in finding companies that, you know, believe in climate change, you know, that we want to help out, that believe for our values is we're trying to uplift women out of financial insecurity, you know, so we want to give back to organizations that believe in that. Farming is huge to us. That's where we began, you know, with apples and produce. And so that's huge to us. So we give back intentionally to those areas. And so that also looks, you know, that really means a lot to our employees and our customers.
Thank you. Thanks for adding that. My next question, Jamie, I'm going to start with you on this one. What do you think the field of ESG will look like in the future? And do you think there will be specific job titles around ESG?
Oh my God, that's so exciting. That's a great question. Yes, there are, the future is now. So really there's a shortage of ESG experience, and whether it's Chief Impact Officer, whether it's housing the E with an E person, the S with an S person, the G with a G person, and forming a team, whether it's individuals sitting within companies, whether it's individuals focused on chief innovation. It's funny, you know, when I started my career, I was a marine biologist, and when I was 6, I wanted to be a marine biologist, and my dad spent my entire life worrying that I was unemployable. And my dad now thinks I'm a genius. He's just like, had no idea. To be honest, none of us in the environmental field did. And so it is a completely different shape, especially people, Europe, for example. I mean, we're just kind of really focused on US right now, but Europe is ahead of us in terms of the demands that they're making. And there's still reasonably traditional roles of helping businesses do philanthropy in developing countries to secure their supply chain. Chanel just invested something like $30 million to make sure that their supply chains were secure, both for environmental sustainability and the resiliency of farmers. So we're just seeing interesting investments, we're seeing interesting partnerships, we're seeing creativity. It is such an, I can't make a big enough pitch for a rewarding, meaningful, honest to God, wake up every day and want to go to work career path. Like, forget the future, just now is a really good time to think about it.
Leela or Stephanie, anything you'd like to add on that point?
I'll add real fast. Just because I think it's funny when I think about it. A couple of years ago, I was at the largest high-tech conference in Barcelona on Internet of Things. And one of the sessions they had was D&I. And when I walked into that session, this is just one small component, but I think it speaks wildly about where things are going. When I walked into that session, I looked around and there was a very small number of people in there. Why? That's a problem. This is a huge technology conference. But second of all, they're all women.
Interesting.
If you had that same session today, if we could all get together again someday, hopefully, I don't think that would be the case at all. So I think things are changing. I think they're changing rapidly across all of the categories. And I think the pressure from companies like BlackRock and Vanguard and some of the others that are really insisting that we all take a look at this is only going to be better for everybody. It makes us be better. And so I hope that in a few years, the conversation is very different and we're far more evolved and advanced. And I think we will be.
Cindy, can I just add to that really quickly? Because I think, Leela, you just touched on such an important part, and we have had gender come up sort of organically. But, you know, interestingly, when Best Buy first launched, it's very nascent D&I, you know, looking at performance, looking how they rewarded people. And they were really trying to attract women. They started this program of performance-only evaluation, and it was run by women. And one of the things that they found was that men also wanted to go and watch their kids' soccer game on Fridays, right? So it wasn't just about, so I think we have forced a stereotype. I think a stereotype for both genders has been forced into the workplace. And one of the really interesting things is ESG, because it's so broad and so profound, allows all kinds of ideas to come forward. So for example, Stephanie, I'm thinking of our COO, and he came forward a couple of weeks ago, and mental health is super important to him, and really wanted to hear what we could do on CSR around that. So I think part of ESG is opening those lines of communication to reach out to, and one, say we need more diverse employees, but that diversity of thought can mean so many different things, even for people who have been stuck in a stereotype for decades in the workplace. So there's just all kinds of wins across the board.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's see, I have a few more questions here. We're going to do our best to get to all of them. Question for Leela. What tools do you use to connect and manage ESG data internally?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Well, I don't know, Jamie, you might tell me something. Maybe I'm going to learn something different. As far as I know, there's no single tool that you can use because there's so many different categories that we think about when ESG comes into play. So fortunately for us, being an environmental company, we track our carbon offsets for all of our customer projects, as well as the power plants that we build and the solar farms and that kind of thing. We have a number of different tools we use. We use Salesforce for a lot of it. It's great. It's a great way for us to keep things in a centralized repository. But there are a number of different tools that we use from an environmental perspective. But equally important to those are the tools that we use across the other categories. For safety and security, there are a number of tools that those groups use. For HR, for some of the programs that we have through there, it's a number of tools that we have for bringing employees together and tracking our diversity and how we're doing against those. So I hope that this is an accurate answer. I don't think there's a single tool that you can invest in that will give you a great output that you can go with. I think the tools are probably exist in your organization in some way or another. And it's more about making sure you're speaking with IT, with HR, with your safety group, if you have one, with your finance group, with your sustainability group, or whoever, so that you're using the data that they use every day, because probably that data exists, and it's about bringing it together and doing some analysis across the board.
Great, thank you, Leela. Stephanie, I saw you nodding. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I just will agree that, again, you can, refine it to what your company's goals are, right, or values. Obviously, the E part of the ESG environment, you can go down, and depending on what your company is, we looked at our product, how does our product impact the environment, being plastic? So that was an easy, just first start. Right. And then, of course, just in our plans of, can we reduce waste? Can we reduce energy? Can we reduce carbon? Things like that. Then you get to the S, social is, again, a very personal thing, obviously we want, I would hope most companies want to treat their employees well, but that right there, what does that mean? Right. For us, volunteering is a huge part of our family value. And so we really want to provide an organization that has the opportunity in every one of their plants to volunteer in their communities. And so we have established a volunteer time off policy, to integrate that, to advance that cause. If that's important to us, we want to give our employees, paid time off to volunteer. We have some guardrails on what the volunteering could look like. But again, that's a value of ours. So again, we can make it specific. And so that's exciting. And what Jamie said, and I hear obviously the enthusiasm, this work, and we have seen this in our own company, energizes the company. It inspires people. It makes them want to come to work. I mean, this is where we spend half of our life, hours, it better be freaking worth it, right. And this work really makes it that way. So it really is, I think, a no-brainer and a win-win.
Okay, we only have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to have to ask you to answer this question fairly quickly, but I have to ask it. Leela, you talked about the need to be nimble, and we've addressed that theme in a couple of different points here in today's discussion. How have the events of 2020 impacted your ESG strategy? And
that's a really good one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
that's
both of you, please.
That's a great one. For us, I think the impact of 2020 gave us even greater sense of purpose of the work that we're doing, and really doing everything that we can to do better by it. So I think when, we had the opportunity to look at across the board, our travel and decreasing our travel and the impact that had, and not commuting to work, and a lot of the things that we were all forced to do in 2020, and seeing the impact. I think we chatted about this earlier, but seeing the impact that had on the environment, if that doesn't give you great pause to think about how we all could do things differently in the future, to not only personally, but also through, the great depth of bigger organizations, how we can make a big impact here. So no question, 2020 was a year like no other. And I think we all look forward to moving on to a brighter future together. But I think it gave us an even deeper sense of purpose, and a greater an even greater sense of respect for the environment and the work that we do.
Thank you. Stephanie, I know certainly QuickLock did a lot of pivoting to address issues over the course of the year. What would you like to share?
Well, again, like you said, the word nimble is key. You know, COVID came upon us and it was like, okay, how are we going to, respond to this? And our company did an amazing job. First and foremost, we talk about family. A family business, our company is all about family. So it was, how do we take care of our employees? How do we keep them safe in their workspace, which is hugely important to us. And we did an outstanding job. Tremendous communication was key throughout. Again, we have 6 plants across the globe. And so again, the pandemic was, talk about a world lived experience, not just in the United States, so this is what we're going through. It was a world lived experience. And we were able to really walk our talk, and we communicated tremendously well. We got feedback from all of our employees that they felt very taken care of, very listened to. Another thing that we did is it really united our company worldwide, because we couldn't fly and be at things. We had to use different plants and offices to collaborate together on calls to, like, for example, install machinery. We had to use 3 different, continents to install machine through Zoom. And that was really amazing. And talk about connected. And then the last thing, what for us as a company, COVID really had us look at how we can make impact in our communities where COVID really hit, where we could help with small businesses that were losing their businesses, and how we could philanthropically give to COVID related. We really made all of our giving this past year on COVID related issues, to, again, climate control and things like that, where farmers were losing their land. We gave to things like that. And so it really, what do you want to say? We got really specialized in these issues. And so, yeah, it was really, again, an impactful year.
Yeah, it sure was. Well, we're running down to the wire here on timing. Again, I really want to thank all of you for participating in this panel. It's been wonderful to have you speaking to our community. Thank you to the NEWIEE community who's here listening in. I've been asked whether this recording will be made available after the fact. Yes, it will. So you'll be able to catch back up on the things that we shared today. Also, you will be receiving a survey on today's event, so please do fill that out. We really value the input that we get from our members. It helps inform current and future programming. I'd like to thank Maureen Callahan, the president of our New Hampshire chapter, for bringing forward this great idea for a panel. So thank you for that. And thank you all again for a really engaging conversation on ESG. Hope you have a great day. Follow NEWIEE on social media, consider membership, check us out for further programming that is going to help you to further your career and learn more about what's going on in our fields. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks.